All right, hi guys. Continue to take some of your questions on 5.3, and this is one that a couple of you have asked about, so I wanted to take a look at this. This is number 14 on your homework for tonight, and again, we're trying to find the zeros of this thing. All right, and the equation is, or the polynomial is, x cubed plus 2x squared plus 5x plus 10 equals 0. So as I start to look at this, and I want to factor it. So I can use the zero product property. But as I look to factor it, I notice we've got 4 terms. We haven't really seen much like that. And the other thing I notice is I can't take out anything. They don't have anything in common. There's nothing in common between all 4 terms. These 3 have a factor of x, but this one doesn't. They don't. 2, 5, 10, and 1. Those don't have any common factors. But one of the little tricks, or one of the things you might want to try, anytime you see a 4-term polynomial, and we've actually seen this before. When we have 4 terms, if I group those first 2 terms and group those second 2 terms together, and let's look at it in terms of the individual groups. Let's see where this takes us. And we've seen something like this before when we were factoring trinomials, when the x squared had a coefficient other than 1. So this shouldn't be completely new to you, but let's look at how it applies here. So if I look at x cubed plus 2x squared, what's the greatest common factor? What's the biggest thing that I can divide both of these by? And they both have a factor of x squared. So I can take that out, and then x squared times what would give me x to the third? Well, that's x to the first, all right? And then x squared times what would give me 2x squared, and that would be 2. So I got x squared times x plus 2. And now when I look at 5x plus 10, and what factor they have in common, they both have a factor of 5. And then 5 times what would give me 5x, and 5 times what would give me 10. I see I've got another x plus 2. I've got 5 times the quantity x plus 2. And now, this should, again, start to look a little familiar to you. I've got x plus 2 in common with both of those, and that'll leave x squared plus 5. And it still equals 0, because that's what we're trying to do, is find the zeros of this polynomial. So now that I've got it factored, I start looking at, well, I'm multiplying 2 things together and getting 0. One of those 2 things has to be 0. So either x plus 2 equals 0, or x squared plus 5 has to equal 0. And I just solve both of these equations individually. So x plus 2 equals 0. I do the opposite and do it to both sides. I get x equals -2. So there's one of my roots or zeros. X squared plus 5 equals 0. And again, I want to get x by itself. So I take away 5 on both sides. That gives me x squared equals -5. And then the opposite of a square, I can square root both sides. And I get x equals, now remember, when you do take the square root of both sides, you get the positive and negative root of that. So it's plus or minus the square root of -5. Really can't do much simplifying with this. 5 doesn't have any factors that are perfect squares, but anytime we take the square root of a negative, it has that factor of -1. And the square root of -1 we've seen is I. So we can simplify that a little bit by putting plus or minus I times the square root of 5. Or you might have 1I times the square root of 5. So again, with a cubic, we're expecting 3 roots, and that's exactly what we got. We got x equals -2. We got I times the square root of 5, and -I, or -1I times the square root of 5. All right. So again, just anytime you have a polynomial with 4 terms, especially if they don't all 4 of them have anything in common, look for that factoring by grouping and see where that takes you. All right, hope that helps. Take care, guys.